Vacancy, and Finance and Economic Development.
The Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise pursuant to Standing Order 67-1 to seek your permission to lay on the table of this Honourable House a paper that sets out requests to Finance Committee for appropriations sought under Section 12 of the Public Management and Finance Act 2020 revision for the government's financial year ending 31st December 2023. If I may, with your permission.
Yes, Honourable Premier. Do you wish to speak to the paper?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Yes, just that in accordance with Standing Order 67-1, which uses the term paper, the paper which has just been laid with respect to appropriations, or request for appropriation changes, stands referred to Finance Committee. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Questions to Honourable Ministers and Members of the Cabinet.
None.
Statements by Honourable Ministers and Members of the Cabinet.
None.
Personal explanations.
None.
Obituary and other ceremonial speeches.
None.
Raising of matters of privileges.
None.
Government business.
None. Can I call on a member to move the adjournment?
Madam Speaker, thank you. I move that the House suspends and stands adjourned to Finance Committee.
The question is that this Honourable House do now stand adjourned. Does suspend until the conclusion of Finance Committee. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, no. The ayes have it. House is now suspended until the conclusion of Finance Committee.
Good morning, everyone, again. I'd like to call this meeting of Finance Committee to order. As is customary, we will start with a prayer in Finance Committee, and I've asked the member from East End to do the prayer.
Let us pray. Our Heavenly Father, you have called us to be the servants of your people. As we meet today in this Finance Committee to deliberate the business on behalf of the people of our beloved Cayman Islands, we ask that you guide these deliberations, that it be respectful and informative to our people. Grant us your peace as we go through these appropriations. We ask this in your Son's holy name. Amen.
Thank you. Please be seated. Good morning, again, members. We have a quorum, so the committee can commence its meeting. Just as a reminder, the quorum of Finance Committee is 10 members, excluding myself, the chairman of the committee. 10 members is a simple majority of 19, and all 19 members, of course, are members of Finance Committee. The purpose of this meeting of Finance Committee is to consider the items shown in the hard copy material that has been distributed to all members, listing the request to Finance Committee for appropriations sought under Section 12 of the Public Management and Finance Act 2020 revision. The committee's approval of these, or for these supplementary expenditures is being sought. Honourable members will know that a meeting of Finance Committee can be called in the absence of Parliament as well. I request the members' usual cooperation in asking their questions promptly, clearly and succinctly. In terms of the approvals for an item on the Finance Committee schedule, using the first item on the schedule as a reminder before the committee, when it comes to taking a vote on an item on the Finance Committee schedule, I shall ask for members' positions by posing the question. All those in favor of supplementary expenditure, in this case I shall use the example EGA 5, primary education services, for an amount of $2,247,831 being approved, please say aye, and those against, no. Members, you might quite rightly ask the question, what are the financial implications of these specific 11 listed expenditures? The Section 12 supplementary expenditure requests now before this committee to be considered by honourable members total $68.8 million. With respect to the 2023 financial year, we have the following projections. The core government is expected to earn $1,033 million in total revenue for 2023, which would be $55.5 million higher than the $978.1 million shown in the original 2023 budget. And the $1,033 million projected for 2023 would be very marginally shy of the $1,037 million revenue projection stated in the April 2023 strategic policy statement for the 2023 financial year. total operating expenditures for 2023, inclusive of the 68.8 million of operating expenditures now being considered by Finance Committee, has been estimated by ministries, portfolios, and offices to be 1,030 million. The net surplus for the 2023 financial year is therefore projected to be 3.3 million. And total bank balances are expected to be 484.4 million as at 31st December 2023. Honourable members, the government is scheduled or projected to comply with the 6 principles of responsible financial management as at 31st December 2023. So, honourable members, let us look at the first item on the schedule listed.
Mr. Chairman, sorry to disturb, but may I ask a question before we move on in relation to the information you've given us?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Okay. The $1 billion and $30 million in expenditure, does that include spending that would have been authorized for 2022 but carried over into 2023?
Honourable Leader of the Opposition, thank you for the question. The answer is yes. When ministries and portfolios and offices were asked to estimate or project their expenditures, it would have included those amounts which were carried forward.
Okay, the next question I have then, Mr. Chairman, is, I mean, $68 million to us seems like a fairly large sum of money that you are seeking authorization for to spend between now and the end of the year. Was any effort made to see what surplus or what underspends there were in other areas that might have been offset some of this spending?
Honourable Leader of the Opposition, the answer is yes, but we take those to be implicit in the projected spending. I think members are aware that considerable requests were made to ensure that spending was appropriate and being done efficiently, and savings were realized where possible. So these projected expenditures would implicitly support an analysis of where savings could be found.
Thank you, sir. And then one final question really revolves around some of these appropriations. Are there amounts in here that have actually been committed or perhaps even spent already?
Honourable Leader of the Opposition, thank you for the question. Those ministries and agencies represented in the requests on this appropriation document before Finance Committee today were asked to confirm, and they did confirm that no commitment on spending has been made in respect of that, or no actual spending has been made in respect of the listed items. They have indicated, however, that they need to be able to get the funding in place to be able to move forward in October.
Okay.
Member for Red Bay.
Morning, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning, sir.
I'm not very good with numbers. I think you said that the projected expenditure, when this 68 million is added to the current appropriations, will total over $1 billion.
Honourable member from Red Bay, yes, the indication has been that this would total $1.03 billion in terms of estimates.
How many million make up a billion? I'm not very good with these things.
It is 1,000.
And you are projecting a surplus of 3 million or 300 million?
Honourable member from Red Bay, the projected surplus number is 3.3 million.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Member from Town West.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just, I guess like the others, I just need to understand something before we, I guess, start looking at these expenses. I mean, I'm looking at the strategic policy statement here that was presented in April, and we were not expected to hit $1 billion in expenses until 2026. So naturally, looking also at the surplus at the time was projected to be, core government surplus was projected to be just under 62 million. And now we're basically understanding it's 3 million. Before, I just need to understand one thing. What is the total amount of funds that have been approved thus far for 2023 that can legally be spent? In other words, I know we have roughly 950 million that's already approved for the budget for this year. Plus they would have been spent from 2022, or approved spent from 2022, that would have been carried over into 2023. And then we would have had other that we have added so far. So just before we start, I just want to understand what is the legal amount that have been approved to be spent so far for the 2023 financial year.
Member, I'll respond to you momentarily. Member, I will ask the Financial Secretary to respond in detail to the question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning to all honorable members. Just to answer the honorable member's question, when we started the 2023 year, the original appropriation for that year, when you consult the planning estimates document, was, say, $951 million. We went through, it obviously has gone through the 2022 year. When we were doing that, something, I think, of the magnitude of 24 million of that 951 was actually, I used the expression or word borrowed. So we took 24 million from the 951 and used it in 2022, which then brought the 951 down to 926, 927 million. Of course, in the 2022 financial year, a similar process happened. We had an original budget. We had $98 million of supplementaries for the 22 year. We added to that the 24 million that we just spoke about. And then we had the actual expenditure in 2022 of something like $967 million. The upshot of that is then at the end of 2022, it was of the magnitude of $76 million from 2022 that had not been spent and therefore eligible to be brought into 2023. So 951 subtract 24 million equals 926 million in 23. Bring forward 76 million from 2022. You're now at $1,003 million, thereabouts, for 23 as a eligibility, if you like, ability to spend. Today, we have before the committee $68 million to be approved. Prior to today, through the Section 11.5 process, through the Section 12 process that was carried out in Finance Committee in June, we had roughly $36 million that had been approved by those two prior processes. The 11.5s plus the June Finance Committee approved was about $36 million. So today, with the committee's approval, would add another 68 to that. And so if that gets approved, we're talking about a total of $104 million then for the entire 2023 year as a supplementary. So as of right now, before the committee starts its deliberations on the $68 million, we have $1,003 million plus the 36 million that was approved previously. So we're looking at, as of right now, a legal ability to spend of the magnitude of $1,039 million. And we're looking to add 68 million to that. And if that then succeeds, then you would then face with $1,107 million as an ability to spend in the current 23 year. Mr. Chairman, if I could just add one other point of detail, and that would be to say that the $98 million that we spoke about, that I just spoke about from the 22 year, approximately half of that 98 was actually spent in 22. So it is the case that oftentimes the amount requested as a supplementary is not spent 100% of the time. So when the chairman speaks of a surplus of $3 million for the 23 year, we all know that that's neither here nor there. That's so small. But the $3 million surplus is based on the belief, we don't know otherwise, that every single dollar that is requested as a supplementary will be spent. That's how you get the $3.3 million as a surplus, assuming that every single dollar here is spent. Our experience in 22 and in even prior years is that that isn't the case. 100% isn't always spent of the amount requested. But if you say to us, well, what do you think is actually going to be spent? Then we have to fall back on the position which the ministries and portfolios have indicated to us, which is they could spend $1,030 million in the current 2023 year.
Mr. Chairman, just one short question to the Financial Secretary. FS, as a veteran of these things, are you comfortable with sailing so close to the wind? In other words, the risk that the government finishes the year in a deficit?
Okay. Thank you, Honorable Member from Red Bay. Of course, it's not comfortable sailing that close to the wind. 3 million is neither here nor there in terms of a surplus. It could easily turn into a break-even position, but I can only repeat what I've just said a short while ago, which is the 3.3 million surplus is based on every single dollar that is being requested actually being spent. And our experience thus far and evidence is that that is not going to occur. Whether it's 50% spent, whether it's 60% spent, whether it's 70% spent, I can't pick one of those numbers, one of those percentages. I can say that in 2022, approximately half of the supplementaries that were requested were actually spent.
And through you, Mr. Chairman, just from my own understanding then, if we approve the 68 million today, the legal spend would be $1,107 million. But the House and the public is made to understand that only $1,030 million of that is going to be spent, which means then that there's an extra 77 million somewhere that is not expected to be spent. So the question, therefore, then is, if we expect that we're not going to spend 77 million, what exercise did we do to basically say we'll reduce that amount and ask for this amount? Because I am recognizing that this is the last year in a 2-year budget, and to legally have the authority to spend $1,107 million, which is even more than what you're looking to spend 3 years from now in 2026, is really scary. Because in essence, we would be giving the government the green light, recognizing what the revenues are, to legally go into a deficit. If we said we're going to allow you to spend $1,107 million, knowing full well that the revenues for this year is going to be substantially less than that amount. So in essence, this finance committee is being asked to allow the government, if needs be, to be in a deficit position. Now, does that make sense?
Member for Bordentown West, yes. I understand your question. Member, I think by reference to what transpired in the 2022 financial year under the previous minister, when we would have been here in Finance Committee at a similar point in time, the projected deficit at that time would have been $40 million and not a current, although small, surplus of $3.3 million. So the Honorable Financial Secretary has noted that in 2022 there was $98 million of authorized expenditure, but only 51 million of that was actually spent. So there is a considerable, generally a considerable underspend, but we are obviously very concerned in terms of trying to make sure that where money is authorized to be spent, that we are cautious in spending that money and trying to achieve savings, as is typically the case.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Chairman. You see, Mr. Chairman, I had far more comfort in the skills of the previous finance minister to push back on these expenses. That's the reason why we had policies such as anything about $5,000 being approved by the minister and so forth. But to see now, like I said, based on the own estimate on the SPS that was presented here several months back, we're looking at spending $1,016,000,000 in 2026. And in essence, now we're asking to spend in 2023 more than we even expected to spend in 2026. And seeing where the ratios drift off to in 2026, again, as per the strategic policy statement that was presented here, then the question is, I'm asking, is that with this level of spend and looking at the ratios and looking at the budget and everything, in terms of what we're committing to, it's really scary at this point. And I mean, bearing in mind, in 2022, we still had COVID to deal with. We had stipends that we were paying out, and we even had an electricity assistance program. So in 2022 alone, we had 33 million of one-off costs. If we added that 33 million in one-off costs that did not come back into 2023, plus the 47 million, the surplus for 2022 would have been around $80 million. So now to not have those costs and looking at a $3 million surplus, I mean, it is, like I said, anyway, the members are free to vote whichever way they want to vote.
Member for Botondale West, the Financial Secretary will address part of your question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank the Honourable Member for Botondale West for his observations, which are obviously sensible observations. I would want to get back to what he referred to earlier as when he mentioned the figure of $77 million as an area that could possibly be gone after and attacked and reduced. In arriving at the $1,030 million of operating expenditure for this current 23 year, as was said before, we canvassed ministries and portfolios and asked for their estimated operating expenditure for the year. And we have recorded those submissions. So each ministry portfolio office can be held to those numbers, which total the $1,030 million. So we can hold them to those total numbers, which if not exceeded, then would be at the level of the $1,030 million. What I would say as well, Premier and honourable members, is that obviously some of the 2022 and the 2023 original appropriations contained amounts which were relatively small. So the best example I can give is in 2022 and in 2023, the original appropriations for your NGS 55 was of the magnitude of $21 million in each year. That was the original appropriation. The amount of actual expenditure on NGS 55 tertiary health care in 22 was of the magnitude of $51 million. So an additional $30 million of operating expenditures was approved for that year for the NGS 55. And even for the current 2023 financial year, again, the starting budget for NGS 55 was roughly the same $21 million. And we're destined to end up for 2023 at the same $52 million, $51 million for NGS 55 for this year as well. So in an attempt to, by way of one example, to address the honourable member's rightful query, your original starting points, your original budgets, to a great degree, in certain selective budgets, were understated with an amount of relatively small amounts, which then have to be supplemented by supplementaries. So your original budget numbers actually grow and grow. And so the numbers that the member speaks to in the future should be more reflective of what is going to, unfortunately, turn out to be actual experiences in those years unless corrective action is taken.
You mentioned earlier, based on the submissions, that you can hold the ministry to these numbers. The only way to legally hold them to the numbers is they're not legally authorized to spend it. So the question is this then, where can we find the 77 million? Because clearly some areas are under budgeted, some are over budgeted, and we accept that coming into the end of a 2-year budget. The point is, if we know we're not going to spend the money in a particular area, wouldn't it be then prudent for us to make sure that at the end of the day, if that's not going to be spent, then we reduce that amount so no one goes out and get creative. But to leave 77 million of approval out there, knowing that people can move money around through Section 11.5s and all that kind of stuff, I mean, from that standpoint, the best place to limit it to that $1.030 billion is in this committee. And if you want to move in between where you need to move to, that's fine. But to have an additional 77 million out there that can run the risk of this country running a deficit for any whatever reason, that's the part I'm uncomfortable with. If you're going to spend $1.030 billion and you need $1.030 billion, that's fine. It is $1.030 billion. And if the committee has to agree to the government to spend $1.030 billion, that's fine. But what where I'm uncomfortable is giving you the ability to spend $77 million more. And that is really where my discomfort comes from. So if we know we're not going to spend something in one area from now, you come to the end of September, you see that the money there is underspent, you got 3 more months to go, you know it's not going to be spent, you know what? Cut the budget from now, remove the number from now. That is really where I'm concerned about. But to literally know that the revenues are going to be literally $70 million less than what would be approved, in essence, we are then green lighting a possible deficit for this year based on the fact that we would have said to the government, we're giving you the okay to go and spend $1.107 billion, knowing that the revenues are going to be roughly $70 million less than that. And that is what it is I'm looking for, because I really and truly don't want us or the country to go back into a deficit. And that's the part it is that I'm really worried about at this point.
Thank you, member from Bodden West. The Honorable Financial Secretary has some statistics that he might be able to share in order to give some degree of comfort. But it just in general, obviously, as Minister for Finance, Premier, and in terms of Cabinet, we are very conscious about spending, and we will try to ensure that we limit spending as much as possible. We have obviously had documents which have been released which indicate the extent to which efforts are made in order to encourage appropriate levels of efficiency and a conservative approach to spending. That is already out in the public sphere. So that is a clear example of the extent to which the government is seeking to control spending and will not simply allow spending to occur simply because it may already be authorized. Now, obviously, if it is perceived to be a significant risk, yes, we could come back down to the Finance Committee to remove authorization to spend, but we have controls over it as well before we even get to that level, and those controls will be exercised.
Mr. Chairman, it's good to get these preliminary thoughts and discussion out of the way. When are we going to get to the agenda?
Member from Bodden West.
West Bay West?
We will, sorry, West Bay West. We will get to that point shortly. The Financial Secretary would just address the member from Bodden West question, and then we'll come to dealing with the specific appropriation.
I do have
there won't be any further
question
questions
too,
after that.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to try and address one aspect of what the Honourable Member for Bordentown spoke about, and that is to say about it was concerning the revenue essentially being, $7 to $7 million less than the potential expenditure for the year, and therefore running the risk of a deficit of that magnitude. At the end of August, the 31st of August this year, the 1st of January numbers, the 8 months of expenditure to the end of August on the operating expenditure side was $647 million. Let's just call that $650 million for rounding sake. $647.7 million. The ministries and portfolios have indicated that they believe that they can spend $1.03 billion. So that leaves then, in the last 4 months of 23, September through December, to get to that $1.03 billion, we need to be spending of the magnitude of $382 million in those last 4 months. 382 million divided by 4 is of the magnitude of spending $95 million every single month for the last 4 months of the year. I can honestly say that in the first 8 months of this year, January through August, no month has even approached $95 million. So just by pure run rate, as the member is quite fond of saying, the run rate for the 8 months indicate that no, we're not going to reach the level of $1.03 billion. And therefore, if the estimated revenue projection for the year is $1.033 billion, it certainly there's an excellent chance that the government would have a small surplus on that basis. I think the member's point about restricting the ministry's portfolios and offices' ability to spend a max of the $1.03 billion and not allow the $7 to $7 million to remain on the table is a valid point, a valid area to pursue. And certainly it is the case that the ministers in cabinet would have available, or can be given to them immediately, what their individual ministry portfolio number is in the makeup of that total. And the cabinet can dictate that your expenditure shall be limited to the amount that you specified.
Mr. Chairman, just one more question. The FS, who's a veteran, has made a very powerful case for why the government is not likely to spend the amount that is being requested. So, but that begs the question, why are we here? If the FS is so certain that we don't need this money, or certainly not all of this money, why are we here asking or dealing with a request for $68 million more?
A member from Red Bay, I think the simple answer is that it is difficult to predict exactly how much of a particular appropriation will be underspent. But the reality is it typically occurs that it is underspent. I'll allow one more question, the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Chairman, back in August, you issued a memo asking, basically the civil service to cut $48 million, round numbers, out of this reduced spending by that amount between that time period and the end of the year. How does that feature and dovetail into the figures we presented here today? Are there any account given to savings that might be achieved there?
Honourable Leader of the Opposition, the letter was issued obviously to ministries, agencies, asking to, if at all possible, achieve those kinds of savings. At this point, what we have before us in terms of the information provided is their best estimate of what they're likely to spend. As the Financial Secretary has indicated, based on the run rate, that is likely to be less than that. So while it is difficult to give a reasonable estimate, it is quite often the case that there is an underspend. Members, I thank you for the questions put. I would like to move on now to the specific appropriations, and I would take EGA 5 primary education services for an amount of $2,247,831. Are there any questions on this item?
Mr. Chairman, through you, I note here that in the narrative that reason given for the change is that the intention is to hire 14 mathematics specialist teachers. Have any of these been hired into position at this point?
Thank you, Mr. Leader. I will ask the Deputy Premier and Minister for Education to respond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, as members would have known that we had the full concurrence of the House that it was an important strategic move to hire, based on statistics, 14 professional math teachers for the sole utilization within our primary school system. That is the plan. That still is the plan. And in fact, every minute that we're here and not voting on this particular vote is a minute more that we can't sign the contracts with those 4 teachers. We started a school about 3 weeks ago? About 3 weeks ago, so we've gone 3 weeks now without having them in the classrooms, but they're available to go once we get permission from this Honourable House, which I sincerely implore all members to support.
Mr. Chairman, thanks to the Minister for that response. I'm glad to hear that at least they are identified and waiting to move forward. The other question I have really, it mentions it is to cover outsourced student services support. Can the Minister tell us what type of services or support are outsourced?
Mr. Chairman, I'm reliably informed that that is for the occupational therapists and the speech therapists that we're having to outsource quite for Cayman Brat. We're having a difficulty for the past 2 years, in fact, getting a full-time replacement. They were in place and they left, so we had to seek for new ones. And we were having an extremely difficult time for people to go to Cayman Brat. Mainly by the nature of the occupation. We see the same thing with the medical services. Persons in such professions need a number of patients to continue to keep up their own accreditations and their own upward mobility in their chosen fields. I am happy to report that the HR has indicated that 2 have now been identified to go, and I'm happy to hear that because it costs quite a bit to not only fly them from Grand Cayman to the Brat, but it's an inadequate services to the needed special needs persons within Cayman Brat because of the flight schedules and other logistical nightmares. Sometimes the flight comes, sometimes it doesn't come. Even when it does come, it leaves a huge backlog of students who are not being the beneficiaries of the intervention program that this government or the government has been proven to do. So I would once again implore the Honourable House to, as expeditious as possible, to approve this vote so that we can get those 2 specialists in place and that our Caymanian children can get the benefit of a world-class education.
Mr. Chair. Sorry, member for Georgetown Central, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Can the minister say if all the assistant teachers have been hired?
I'll ask my acting chief officer, Honorable Chair, to identify herself and make a response to this Honorable Committee.
Thank you very much, Minister.
Mr. Chair.
Please state for the record your full name
Lynette
and title.
Monteith, Acting Chief Officer in the Ministry of Education. Yes, that is correct. All of the assistant teachers have been hired.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? If not, we'll put this this item to the vote. All those in favor of supplementary expenditure with respect to EGA 5 primary education services for an amount of $2,247,831 being approved, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no.
Mr. Chairman, sir, I can have a division, please.
Honorable Juliana O'Connor Connolly.
Aye.
Honorable Kenneth Bryan.
Aye.
Honorable Sabrina Turner.
Aye.
Honorable Johanna Ebanks.
Aye.
Honorable Andre Ebanks.
Aye.
Honorable Bernie Bush. Honorable Catherine Ebanks Wilkes.
Aye.
Ms. Heather Bodden.
Aye.
Honorable Isaac Rankin.
Aye.
Honorable Makiva Bush.
Aye.
Honorable Roy McTaggart.
Abstain.
Mr. Joseph Hugh.
Abstain.
Mr. Moses Kirkconnell. Absent. Ms. Barbara Connolly.
Abstain.
Honorable Sir Alden McLaughlin.
Abstain.
Mr. David White.
Abstain.
Mr. Christopher Saunders.
Abstain.
Mr. Dwayne Seymour.
Abstain.
The result of the division is 10 ayes, 7 abstentions, and 1 absent. The ayes have it. Thank you very much, members. We'll move on to the next item, which is EGA 6 secondary education services for an amount of $6,804,000. Are there any questions on this item? If there are no questions, I will put this item to a vote. All those in favor of supplementary expenditure with respect to EGA 6 secondary education services for an amount of $6,804,000, please say aye.
Aye.
And those against, no.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
can I have a division, please?
Honorable Juliana O'Connor Connolly. Honorable Kenneth Bryan.
Aye.
Honorable Sabrina Turner.
Aye.
Honorable Johanna Ebanks. Aye. Honorable Andre Ebanks.
Aye.
Honorable Bernie Bush. Aye. Honorable Catherine Ebanks.
Aye.
Ms. Heather Borden,
Aye.
Honorable Isaac Rankin,
Aye.
Honorable Makiva Bush,
Aye.
Honorable Roy McTaggart,
Abstain.
Mr. Joseph Hugh,
Abstain.
Mr. Moses Kirkconnell, absent. Ms. Barbara Connolly,
Abstain.
Honorable Sir Alden McLaughlin,
Abstain.
Mr. David White,
Abstain.
Mr. Christopher Saunders,
Abstain.
Mr. Dwayne Seymour, absent.
Members, thank you. The result of the division is 10 ayes, 6 abstentions, and 2 absent. The ayes have it. We will now move on to the next item, which is EGA 8 in the schedule for the 2023 financial year. The appropriation description is financial maintenance and operations. Sorry. Oh, sorry. Pardon me. Facilities, maintenance, and operational school support services for an amount of $3,600,000. Are there any questions on this item? If there are no questions,
Mr. Chairman.
Before Red Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, the reasons given in the document for the significant increase seem to me to be issues that ought to have been identified when the original budget was being prepared. I don't see any new service here. Centralized tendering and procurement services for capital and recurrent expenditure orders for schools, identifying quality suppliers, etc., managing tendering processes, student transportation, oversight of canteen services, oversight of janitorial services, oversight of campus security services, provision of building management and facility maintenance services. All of these are things that have to be done all the time. And so my question is, what has occurred to drive the cost up by $3.6 million from an original appropriation of $14,764,507?
Thank you, member from Red Bay, Chief Officer Monteith.
Through you, Mr. Chairman. In terms of transportation, there were additional routes put on for also the new John Gray's High School services came online, and those were services that we couldn't have predicted beforehand. And our infrastructure, many of our buildings are quite old, so there are increasing costs in maintaining those buildings.
Thank you, Chief Officer Monteith. If there are no further questions, I will put the matter to the vote. All those in favor of supplementary expenditure with respect to EGA 8, facilities, maintenance, and operational school support services, for an amount of $3,600,000, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. The ayes have it.
And Mr. Chairman, can we have a division, please?
Honorable Juliana O'Connor Connolly,
Aye.
Honorable Kenneth Bryan,
Aye.
Honorable Sabrina Turner,
Aye.
Honorable Johanna Ebanks,
Aye.
Honorable Andre Ebanks,
Aye.
Honorable Bernie Bush, Honorable Catherine Ebanks, Ms. Heather Bodden,
Aye.
Honorable Isaac Rankin,
Aye.
Honorable Makiva Bush,
Aye.
Honorable Roy McTaggart,
Abstain.
Mr. Joseph Hugh,
Abstain.
Mr. Moses Kirkconnell, absent. Ms. Barbara Connolly,
Abstain.
Honorable Sir Alden McLaughlin,
Abstain.
Mr. David White,
Abstain.
Mr. Christopher Saunders,
Abstain.
Mr. Dwayne Seymour, absent.
Members, the results of the division, 10 ayes, 6 abstentions, 2 absences. Again, the ayes have it. We will now move to the next appropriation item, which is the fourth item in the schedule. That is TP 30. Local and overseas scholarships and bursaries for an amount of $6,924,153. Are there any questions on this item? If there are no questions, I will put the item to the vote.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, which one are we doing? TP 30?
Yes.
Just one quick question. How many kids did we do scholarships for this year?
I'm reliably informed, Mr. Chair, 822 students.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you very much. And this is an increase of how much from the previous year?
Chief Officer Monteith.
Through you, Mr. Chair, 102 students increased.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
If there are no further questions, I will put this item to the vote. All those in favor of supplementary expenditure with respect to TP 30, local and overseas scholarships and bursaries for an amount of $6,924,153, please say aye.
Aye.
And those against, no. The ayes have it.
Division, Mr. Chair.
Honorable Juliana O'Connor Connolly,
Aye.
Honorable Kenneth Bryan,
Aye.
Honorable Sabrina Turner,
Aye.
Honorable Johanna Ebanks,
Aye.
Honorable Andre Ebanks,
Aye.
Honorable Bernard Bush, Honorable Catherine Ebanks Wilkes,
Aye.
Miss Heather Bodden,
Aye.
Honorable Isaac Rankin,
Aye.
Honorable Makiva Bush,
Aye.
Honorable Roy McTaggart,
Abstain.
Mr. Joseph Hugh,
Abstain.
Mr. Moses Kirkconnell, absent. Miss Barbara Connolly,
Abstain.
Honorable Sir Alden McLaughlin,
Abstain.
Mr. David White,
Abstain.
Mr. Christopher Saunders,
Abstain.
Mr. Dwayne Seymour, absent.
Honourable members, the results of the division are as follows: 10 ayes, 6 abstentions, and 2 absences. Again, the ayes have it.
Mr. Chair, may I beg your indulgence before my educational staff leave to sincerely convey the government's appreciation for them working assiduously as they usually do to ensure that we can get this very needed services. I would ask for them to be excused, as it's a great temptation to stay today, but we need to make sure that these services get expedited and that we can get our math teachers and our local scholarship recipients, especially that are waiting to be paid, all processed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and I concur with your sentiments. We will now move to the next item, which is the fifth item on the schedule for the 23 financial year. That is OE 134, depreciation of executive assets, Ministry of District Administration and Lands, for an amount of $6,569,000. Are there any questions on this item?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Member from Red Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, this item is referenced or is described as a depreciation of executive assets. The original appropriation when the 2022-2023 budget was appropriated was $685,000. The sum now being asked to be voted for as a depreciation amount is $6.5 million. The reason for appropriation change is stated to fund the depreciation of executive assets, roads and buildings in Cayman Brac and Little Cayman that were a part of the 2021 post-election transfer of assets from the previous ministry. My question is, Mr. Chairman, why was this amount then not appropriated to fund the depreciation of these assets when they were the responsibility of the previous ministry? It's the same assets.
Thank you, Member. Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to Honorable Sir Alden for that question. Unfortunately, unless I got into the arena of indirect evidence, I'm not in a position to answer that because I was not the Minister of Finance at that time, neither was I the Minister of Tourism. It was under the previous ministry of which I was a part of the government, but not to that specific. Sorry, I said tourism. He had tourism and district admin, so that there's no confusion. It's not the current Minister of Tourism. It's my colleague, and I'm just relaying the facts that they are. It just happened that my colleague, Honorable Moses Colonel, and so neither of us, my Deputy Chief Officer, myself, would know that. If the member wishes, I could try to get it in writing, or we could maybe ask the former Minister of Tourism if he knows, because I don't know. Former Minister of Finance, sorry.
Mr. Chairman, I think the Minister is mistaken in her response. I'm not asking about the 2021 year. We came down here in 2022 and proposed a 2-year budget. It ought to have been dealt with in that budget, not the 2021 budget.
Member for Red Bay, thank you for the question. I think the Financial Secretary has information which would be useful in providing clarity on this issue in order to assist the Ministry of Education, which I would ask him to provide at this point. You can provide any follow-up questions at that point, and to which the Ministry may be willing to respond if they're able to. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think, Mr. Chairman, to answer the honourable member for Red Bay's question, it's the wording in the section of the page that deals with the reason for the appropriation change. I think it's not the best answer that could be given. I think the real reason for the increase in the amount of depreciation being requested now is because in late 2021 there was a wholesale exercise to revalue fixed assets throughout the entire government, and as a result of that exercise, asset values did increase. And so the depreciation amount increased as well. Now you can just visually see it here. It's a tenfold increase. But that is the real driver behind why the depreciation has increased to this extent. It is not so much that for some other, that there was an insufficient budget. That wasn't the real reason, because at the time the budgets were put together, which were the House approved in November 2021. At that time, the fixed asset revaluation exercise had not been completed. Mr. Chairman, what I can say too is that if we were to look at the amount of expenditure on this same item in 2021, the actual expenditure was 3.5 million in 2021 on this same category, OE 134. In 2022, the expenditure was $7 million. And so for 2023, with the amount being requested of $6.5 million, added to the original budget of almost 700,000, the expenditure for 23 would be of the magnitude of, again, 7.3 million. So that would be comparable then with the 2022 expenditure amount. So the real reason for the request is because of not so much budgeting the wrong amount, but there was an exercise, a revaluation exercise that took place after the 22 and 23 budgets were established.
Mr. Chairman.
So that's fine.
Oh.
That's fine.
Through you, Mr. Chairman.
Member for Bottom West.
Through you, Mr. Chairman. Recognizing that, I mean, estimates and everything else can change. The question is, considering now all the different capital projects and all the stuff that has happened in this financial year, will there be any revaluation later on this year that may also trigger again another situation where the amount that we actually need is way more than actually what is actually required now? Because when you have just $3 million surplus for this year, and recognizing that this one estimate alone was over 6.5, well, almost a $6 million difference. I mean, you understand where we're coming from, where one exercise like this can literally wipe out the entire surplus for this year. Why we're a little bit scared about scaling this close to the wind?
Thank you, Member for Bottom West. The valuation exercise that is carried out by government is usually done on a 3 to 5 year basis. So on that basis, the earliest revaluation exercise might occur would be 2025.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One last question on this issue. I remember in some months, some ministries had negative depreciation reported to the Ministry of Finance at the time. Have we gone through this year to make sure now that everyone is actually doing the depreciation correctly and that there are no negative depreciation that could probably skew these numbers or throw these numbers off? Because if you're saying last year it was, what was the amount you said was the last year? Was 7 million or something, but then we would have had assets on for this year that would have also, well, assets from last year that would have been fully depreciated increase the depreciation expense for this year. So the depreciation expense for this year is supposed to be greater than it is for last year, unless they were in a write-offs or anything like that.
Member for Bottom West, I'll have the Financial Secretary provide a response to you. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'm looking at a copy of a cabinet note that was done for August 2023. on the category of depreciation, all of the months thus far in the year do actually show a positive amount being charged for depreciation. Yes, yes, there is some variability in the monthly amounts, but they certainly are all positive. So just by way of example, for the month of January 23, the amount being depreciated for that month was 4.3 million. Then in February, it's 3.5 million. In March, it's 5.4 million, and so on. But there's no negative amounts being charged there.
Well, the thing about it is, FS, thanks very much. To go from 4.3 to 3.5 to 5.4, it would basically means that in the month of February, someone probably didn't reverse their accrual, so, and then it went back up. So there's a possibility then for the number to have come down. It would have mean that one ministry would have had negative depreciation within the month where they basically did not reaccrue the amount.
Yeah, the answer in that respect is that there might have been a ministry with zero depreciation value at that point. I think with respect to this item, we have thoroughly explored this issue.
I wouldn't mind if I could ask one more question.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
oh, go ahead. I just wanted to say I wouldn't mind if my finance team had an opportunity to elucidate on some of the exchanges earlier.
Indeed, Madam Minister, thank you. Who is it? The record, please state your full name and title.
Deputy
corresponding.
Good morning. Deputy Chief Officer Acting Nicola Anderson Wildman. Just to answer the question earlier, through you, Mr. Chair, there was a valuation that was done on assets, and that is the main reason why we would not have budgeted or had the opportunity to budget prior to the 2022-2023 fiscal year. And just to clarify that our ministry, which was established in July 2021, the $3.5 million that was mentioned earlier was only for 6 months. So just to clarify that, and not for the full fiscal year. Also, subsequent to that, the depreciation has ranged between 7.1 to 7.2 million. This covers Cayman Brac roads, Little Cayman roads, and Sister Islands buildings, which were all reevaluated at significantly higher figures. And also just to mention that the useful life varied significantly and much lower than what was expected, which has also spurred the increase in depreciation.
Thank you very much for that answer. If we have no further questions, I will put the item to a vote. All those in favor of supplementary expenditure with respect to OE 134, depreciation of executive assets, Ministry of District Administration and Lands, for an amount of $6,569,000, please say aye.
Aye.
And those against, no. The ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, we have a division,
Yes.
please.
Thank you.
Honorable Juliana O'Connor Connolly.
Aye.
Honorable Kenneth Bryan.
Aye.
Honorable Sabrina Turner.
Aye.
Honorable Johanna Ebanks.
Aye.
Honorable Andre Ebanks.
Aye.
Honorable Bernie Bush.
Aye.
Honorable Catherine Ebanks Wilkes.
Aye.
Ms. Heather Bodden.
Aye.
Honorable Isaac Rankin.
Aye.
Honorable Makiva Bush.
Aye.
Honorable Roy McTaggart.
Abstain.
Mr. Joseph Hugh.
Abstain.
Mr. Moses Kirkconnell. Absent. Ms. Barbara Connolly.
Abstain.
Honorable Sir Alden McLaughlin.
Abstain.
Mr. David White,
Abstain.
Mr. Christopher Saunders,
Abstain.
Mr. Dwayne Seymour, absent.
Thank you, honorable members. The result of the division is 10 ayes, 6 abstentions, 2 absences. The ayes have it again.
Mr. Chair, once again, with your kind indulgence, I'd like to thank my staff in the ministry, the civil servants, for putting this together and to be here to assist the committee in a formative methodology. Most grateful.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Premier, and I share those sentiments, as do all members on the government side. Thank you. Ladies and honorable members, we will now proceed to the next item on the schedule for the 23 financial year. That is HAF 5, Domestic and Aerodrome Aerodrome Fire Services, for an amount of $1,500,000. Are there any questions on this item?
Mr. Chairman, can
Leader of the Opposition.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Can you tell us what period this overtime relates to?
Thank you, Honorable Leader of the Opposition. The Minister for Home Affairs.
Mr. Chair, through you. I've been reliably told that this relates to meet overtime cost in 2023.
Thank you. Any further questions?
I'm just trying to understand then how we get a figure like 1.5 million for the year. Is there an issue with staffing in the domestic and aerodrome fire services that's causing people to work overtime?
Minister for Home Affairs.
Madam Chair, sorry. Mr. Chairman, if you would indulge me to allow my chief officer to elaborate on this as it is pertaining to staffing.
Thank you. And Mr. Eubanks, if you could just state your full name and title for the record.
Michael Eubanks, Acting Chief Officer for the Ministry of Home Affairs. Mr. Chairman, through you, thank the member for the question. Absolutely, the Cayman Islands Fire Service has been operating with a deficit of about 30 fire officers, and it is in that particular rank, the frontline response officer, where we see the overtime driver placed from an organizational perspective. It is also probably not lost in this House that the Cayman Islands Fire Service has been evolving in terms of their response capability and capacity. So we are having to respond and prepare for both aviation, domestic structural brush fire calls. We've also seen an increase in the emergency medical response assist calls to our colleagues at the HSA. And the House will also be apprised that the fire service also engages in tandem with the Coast Guard with a maritime inshore response capability up to 2 miles. So it is the combination of those response services that oftentimes runs an unpredictable response mechanism in terms of overtime, having to put safe systems of work, in other words, the right amount of fire officers to match the risk profile of the scene at hand.
Through you again, Mr. Chairman. Chief Officer, can you tell us where is the greatest shortage, domestic, aerodrome, in terms of staffing?
Mr. Chairman,
yes,
through you. The biggest driver of the overtime is on the domestic side of the fire service, and in response to identifying that gap, the fire service has, on the approval of the cabinet, recently set forth to recruit an additional 22 Caymanian fire service recruit officers. In tandem with that, we've also seen early successes in terms of partnership with DEH. The landfill fires are a very unpredictable driver of overtime in terms of putting fire officers on the front line. And with the compacting services that we've seen recently at the landfill, that also in combination with the additional recruits, we expect to see a reduction in the reliance on overtime on the domestic side of the operation.
Thank you, Mr. Ebanks. Any other questions?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Member from Georgetown North.
Mr. Chairman, through you, I just wanted for clarification, you said that you just got approval from Cabinet to hire another 22. You said you were short 32 staff members. Did this happen recently, or how long have we had that shortage in staff members? And I'm just trying to figure out why we're just now getting approval to hire 22 when we've been 32 members short.
Thank you, Mr. Ebanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the member's question, in any organization, I suppose there is an attrition rate where we're trying to backfill and make sure that we have the right number of staffing to match the risk profile that the organization is facing. The fire service is actively trying to forecast and predict an evolving risk landscape when it comes to fire and rescue services. And so the decision to recruit the additional 22 fire officers came last year, and the funding was made available for that recently, hence the recruitment exercise is now ongoing.
Thank you, Mr. Ebanks. If there are no further questions, I will put this item to the vote. All those in favor of supplementary expenditure with respect to HAF 5, domestic and aerodrome fire services for an amount of $1,500,000, please say aye.
Aye.
And those against, no.
Mr. Chair,
The ayes.
can I have a division, please?
Honorable Juliana O'Connor Connolly.
Aye.
Honorable Kenneth Bryan.
Aye.
Honorable Sabrina Turner.
Aye.
Honorable Johanna Ebanks.
Aye.
Honorable Andre Ebanks.
Aye.
Honorable Bernie Bush.
Aye.
Honorable Catherine Ebanks Wilkes.
Aye.
Miss Heather Bodden.
Aye.
Honorable Isaac Rankin.
Aye.
Honorable Makiva Bush.
Aye.
Honorable Roy McTaggart.
Abstain.
Mr. Joseph Hugh.
Abstain.
Mr. Moses Kirkconnell. Absent. Miss Barbara Connolly.
Abstain.
Honorable Sir Alden McLaughlin.
Abstain.
Mr. David White.
Abstain.
Mr. Christopher Saunders.
Abstain.
Mr. Dwayne Seymour. Absent.
Honourable members, the results of the division are 10 ayes, 6 abstentions, 2 absences. The ayes have it. We will move on to the next item on the schedule for the 23 financial year. That is HAF 6, Regiment Services, for an amount of $135,186. Are there any questions on this item? If there are no questions, I will put this item to the vote. All those in favor of supplementary expenditure with respect to HAF 6, Regiment Services, for an amount of $135,186, please say aye.
Aye.
And those against, no. The ayes have it.
Division, Mr. Chair.
Honorable Juliana O'Connor Connolly.
Aye.
Honorable Kenneth Bryan.
Aye.
Honorable Sabrina Turner.
Aye.
Honorable Johanna Ebanks.
Aye.
Honorable Andre Ebanks.
Aye.
Honorable Bernie Bush. Aye. Honorable Catherine Ebanks Wilkes.
Aye.
Ms. Heather Bodden,
Aye.
Honorable Isaac Rankin,
Aye.
Honorable Makiva Bush,
Aye.
Honorable Roy McTaggart,
Abstain.
Mr. Joseph Hugh, absent. Mr. Moses Kirkconnell, absent. Ms. Barbara Connolly,
Abstain.
Honorable Sir Alden McLaughlin,
Aye. Sorry, ma'am. Abstain.
Mr. David White,
Abstain.
Mr. Christopher Saunders,
Abstain.
Mr. Dwayne Seymour, absent.
Thank you, honorable members. The result of the division stands at 10 ayes, 5 abstentions, and 3 absences. The ayes have it as noted. We will now move on to the
Mr.
next.
Chair, with your indulgence, please. I'd like to take this time to publicly thank my ministerial team for their hard work and congratulate the support those fire officers who have now been able to enter a new career field and, of course, the upward promotion from within. I want to thank my honorable colleagues for their support publicly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister, and those sentiments are shared. Thank you, members. Honorable members, we will now move on to the 8th item on the schedule for the 23 financial year. That is PAH 16, licensing of drivers and vehicles for an amount of $1 million. Are there any questions on this item?
Mr.
Honourable
Chairman,
Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Chairman, on the face of this, it appears that there is a more than doubling of the appropriation for the licensing of drivers and vehicles. But I am aware that this is probably not the full cost because of a potential, there are offsets in revenue that are netted. Can we get the minister or someone to explain to us how we get to the 2.1 million and the additional spending of 1 million?
Thank you, Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Mr. Bush, if you are responding, as usual, would you please state your full name and title for the record?
Good morning. Apologies. I have a bit of a throat issue, Mr. Chair. Eric Bush, Chief Officer for the Ministry of Planning, Agriculture, Housing and Infrastructure. The honourable member is correct that the $917,000 that is appropriated via Cabinet is not the total budget for the Department of Vehicle and Driver's Licenses. In fact, the total approved original budget is $4.385 million. $173 million of that was taken or reduced in 2022 to uplift the 2022 budget. So, and then we received a Section 11.5 approval for $400,000, which makes the current revised budget $4.612 million. So the other part of that is from third-party revenue, to answer the member's question.
Thank you, Mr. Bush. Any further questions? Honourable.
Just one more from me.
Opposition. Thank you.
Mr.
One more
Bush,
question.
Thank you. In terms of the licensing activity that's taking place there now, it's substantially more. Do you have any figures at hand that you might be able to share with regard to the actual numbers?
Thank you, Mr. Leader. Mr. Bush.
Mr. Chair, if I can be allowed to defer to the Director on those statistics.
Okay,
Director
thank you,
of DVDL.
sir. Thank you, Mr. Nixon. As usual, please state your full name and title for the record.
Name is David Dixon, Director of Vehicle and Driver's Licensing. Pardon me till I get my papers. The total number of drivers on the current register is now 59,522. The total number of vehicle license is now 60,369 vehicles. On average, we average between 5,000 to 6,000 new vehicles to the register each year, and 400 to 500 new drivers each month, including Geneva transfer from foreign countries.
Thank you, Mr. Dixon. Any further questions?
One more, sir. Are you seeing any slowdown in the numbers of vehicles being licensed, new vehicles being licensed as a result of the recent changes and limitations on the age of vehicles or used vehicles being imported into the island?
To the honourable member, the only slowdown we've seen is the reduction in the age of vehicle, but the number of vehicles continue, and you appreciate that we would have had a population increase with the number of work permit holders. So they and their dependents rely heavily on that mode of transportation, which is private vehicles.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Dixon. Sorry, Minister.
Through you, Mr. Chair, would it be fair to say, based on your answer just now, that you're seeing a drop in the age of vehicles, that the government policy is actually working based on that data?
To the honourable member, Mr. Chair, that is correct.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. If there are no other questions, I propose to put the matter to a vote. All those in favor of supplementary expenditure with respect to PAH 16, licensing of drivers and vehicles for an amount of $1 million, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. The ayes have it.
Division, please, sir.
Honorable Juliana O'Connor Connolly.
Aye.
Honorable Kenneth Bryan.
Aye.
Honorable Sabrina Turner.
Aye.
Honorable Johanna Ebanks.
Aye.
Honorable Andre Ebanks.
Aye.
Honorable Bernie Bush.
Aye.
Honorable Catherine Ebanks Wilkes.
Aye.
Miss Heather Budden.
Aye.
Honorable Isaac Rankin.
Aye.
Honorable Makiva Bush.
Aye.
Honorable Roy McTaggart.
Abstain.
Mr. Joseph Hugh.
Abstain.
Mr. Moses Kirkconnell. Absent. Miss Barbara Connolly.
Abstain.
Honorable Sir Alden McLaughlin.
Abstain.
Mr. David White.
Abstain.
Mr. Christopher Saunders.
Abstain.
Mr. Dwayne Seymour. Absent.
Honourable members, the result of the division is 10 ayes, 6 abstentions, and 2 absentees. The ayes have it, as noted. Honourable members, let us look at the 10th item on the schedule for the 2023 financial year. That is HEA 2, sorry, the ninth item, HEA 2, which is medical care for indigents for an amount of $9,368,000. If we could pause for a moment, I would like to extend the opportunity to the Minister to thank his team. Minister, just the opportunity for you to thank your team.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I just want to thank the team of DVDL, the Ministry, the Chief Officer for all the hard work that they've done and all the hard work that they continue to do for the team. Bye.
Thank you, and the chair shares those sentiments. Apologies for moving very quickly there. Okay, so members, we will move then to the ninth item on the schedule, which is HEA 2, medical care for indigents for an amount of $9,368,000, as noted earlier. Are there any questions on this item?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Member for Red Bay.
Mr. Chairman, this is a medical care for indigents. The original appropriation in 2023 was for $12 million. We are now being asked to approve a revised appropriation of $22,568,000. 12 million for the original appropriation, 3.2 million moved out of the 2023 or appropriation and utilized in 2022. 9,368,000 supplementary appropriation now being requested under Section 12 of the PMFA, and 4.4 million approved by Cabinet under Section 11.5 of the same Act. I have a number of questions, Mr. Chairman. This is for provision for medical care to indigent patients, primary care, secondary care, and dental and mental health care. My first question, Mr. Chairman, is this amount already spent or committed? That is the amount we are now being asked to approve, which is $9,368,000.
Thank you, Member for Red Bay. I think we had noted earlier in some preliminary questions that this item would not have been spent, but I will allow Ms. Pucci to respond. Ms. Pucci, if you would state your full name and title for the record as usual. Thank you.
Good morning, Nellie Pucci, Chief Officer of the Ministry of Health and Wellness. Mr. Chairman, through you, no, these funds have not yet been spent.
Mr. Chairman, I wish to thank the Chief Officer through you for the answer. So, Mr. Chairman, I wonder if the Chief Officer can confirm that they are projecting to spend more than $3 million a month on medical care for indigents between now and the end of this fiscal year, which is October, November, and December.
Chief Officer Pucci.
Mr. Chairman, through you, that is correct. The burn rate has been the term that's been utilized quite frequently is approximately $3 million per month.
Mr. Chairman, I hope that the policy decision which is taken or is being taken in preparation of the upcoming budget takes these sums into account. and that we don't get presented here with a budget which is massively understated, because we've gone from 12 million to 22.5.
Member for Redby, thank you. I would note that those types of expenditures are typically difficult to forecast, and I would say that multiple administrations in the past have had a similar approach and a similar difficulty in trying to forecast those expenditures, and have indeed budgeted significantly less, knowing that it may be the forecast expenditures were going to be higher. So there is nothing new in that approach. Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Chairman,
Member for West Bay West.
Can I ask whether this particular amount, when it says medical care for indigents, would this be including the seamen as well in this grouping? Seamen. No?
Mr. Bush, I think the answer is no, it would not include expenses for seamen. There's a separate budget item in respect to that. Pardon me, member for West Bay West, not Mr. Bush. Are there any other questions in respect of this item?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Member from Bordentown West.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And when everyone knows where I stand on this, this is an issue that has been around for the longest time, that has plagued successive government. And before I ask my question, Mr. Speaker, I just want to kind of set the stage as to where my discomfort comes in the fact that the public purse is actually carrying this amount. Last year between, if memory serves me right, last year between NGS 55 and HEA2, we spent roughly around $73 million. And going back again to the census, where 93% of the people in this country, as per the 2021 census, has health insurance. And those premiums are actually in excess of $300 and something million that people are actually paying to the insurance, the private insurance companies in premiums. The question is, through you, Mr. Chairman, is where are we with regards to the expansion of Cineco in terms of start getting more premiums out of the private sector, in the sense of allowing more people to get into the government insurance company? Because what we have done and continue to do, Mr. Chairman, is privatize profits and socialize the losses. And at some point, we have to put our foot down, because the public can't. We have to take care of our people, but the people can't continue being burdened by the fact that people have inadequate insurance in this country, and they're resorting to the government to make up the difference. This is something that every government has faced, and at some point, we have to put our foot down. So the question in that, Mr. Chairman, is in terms of what is the policy that we're looking at now, or how far along are we in terms of getting the expansion of Cineco so we can bring more people under the umbrella. And the whole idea of insurance is actually to spread risk where we don't end up with all the risk.
Thank you, member for Bordentown West.
Mr. Chair, if you would allow me, I think that would be more applicable to the next appropriation vote.
Actually goes to both of them, because we have the HSA and the non-HSA. Well, the other question then, Mr. Chairman, just for my own, for listening public, if you look at the HSA's annual statements about 2020 and 2021, they actually
Member, does this relate? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. They actually beat budget by more than $33 million. Now, I don't really freak out much about HEA2 for the simple fact that this is within the government hospital, and this in essence is us providing a service via our own hospital. Now, it means if we're spending more in terms of expenses, it means that the HSA is making more in terms of revenues. And seeing that between 2020 and 2021, that the HSA exceeded budget by more than $33 million, my question is there any dividend or anything coming back to the government as a result of HSA's overperformance? Because if we're spending more, we should at least be getting back some dividend or something from the HSA. This is a government company.
Thank you, member for Bordentown West. Is Chief Officer able to answer?
If it's talking in regards to dividends coming back to government, I think that would be a Ministry of Finance function, and whether or not that has been relayed to all SAGCs as to whether or not the government will be demanding a dividend payment or not.
Thank you, Chief Officer. The information I have been provided with is that no dividends have been received by the Finance Ministry from the HSA.
But, Mr. Chairman,
member for Bordentown West.
Has there
Sorry,
ever been?
West Bay West.
Yes, yes.
Pardon.
I know what you mean. Has there ever been such a thing as any dividends coming from the Health Services Authority?
In the past, they were losing money. Now they basically beat budget now by 33 million. So they're clearly doing much better than they did in the past. So having beat budget by 33 million between 2020 and 2021, as per their own annual financial statements, and part of that is the fact that government is spending more money with them. Then you would think that, I mean, it will help your ratios if you get it back because it goes towards your income.
But sorry, Mr. Chairman, but is the member saying that they made a
member
profit of 33 million?
Uh,
No, they beat budget for 2020.
Mr.
They actually
Chair,
made a profit
Mr.
of
Chair,
about 8 million.
Mr. Chair, I'm not trying to be difficult, but other members need to be able to absorb the information.
Right.
They have to go through you as chair.
I absolutely agree. Thank you, Minister. Too many questions being asked at the same time.
Mr. Chairman, when I referred my question to you, I said through you, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
directed to the minister, and as long as I've been in the House, I know that is allowed. Anyway, I needed to get that clear because I have never known that HSA hasn't been made a profit as such that it could pay back government. I never heard about it, but that would be good if all of them could do so.
Thank you, member for West Bay West. Certainly there is a provision within the Public Management and Finance Act for a formula and to be applied to statutory authorities in respect of the identification of potential dividends. And my understanding is that that formula, when applied to HSA, has not resulted in any dividends being available or offered. Mr. Leader of the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
No, nothing further, sir. Your last statement covered what I wanted to draw members' attention to. That there is a.
Thank you, sir. If there are no further questions, I'll put the. Sorry, if there are no further questions, I'll put the item to a vote. All those in favor of supplementary expenditure, which with respect to HEA2 medical care for indigents for an amount of $9,368,000, please say aye.
Aye.
And those against, no. The ayes have it.
Chairman, may I have a division, please?
Honorable Juliana O'Connor Connolly. Aye. Honorable Kenneth Bryan.
Aye.
Honorable Sabrina Turner.
Aye.
Honorable Johanna Ebanks.
Aye.
Honorable Andre Ebanks.
Aye.
Honorable Bernie Bush.
Aye.
Honorable Catherine Ebanks Wilkes.
Aye.
Miss Heather Bodden.
Aye.
Honorable Isaac Rankin.
Aye.
Honorable Makiva Bush. Honorable Roy McTaggart,
Abstain.
Mr. Joseph Hugh,
Abstain.
Mr. Moses Kirkconnell, absent. Ms. Barbara Connolly, absent. Honorable Sir Alden McLaughlin,
Abstain.
Mr. David White,
Abstain.
Mr. Christopher Saunders,
Abstain.
Mr. Dwayne Seymour, absent.
Honorable members, the result of the division is 10 ayes, 5 abstentions, and 3 absences. The ayes have it as noted. We will now move on to the next item, which is the 10th item in the schedule for the 2023 financial year. That is NGS 55, tertiary medical care at various local and overseas institutions, for an amount of $21,826,000. Are there any questions on this
Yes,
item?
Mr. Chairman.
Member for Red Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, this is the notorious NGS 55. Tertiary medical care at various local and overseas institutions. Original appropriation for 2023, $21,593,371. And a revised appropriation of $52,419,371. This committee is being asked to approve $21,826,000. So, Mr. Chairman, we are being asked to approve more than twice the amount that was originally appropriated for the 2023 budget. Now, I think we all are aware that, as I said, this is notorious for varying greatly at this point in the year from what the original appropriation was. It includes overseas care for indigents and then for seafarers, veterans, and with local and tertiary medical care. Aside from the concerns which we have voiced many times about how much government is having to spend on these things, I'm going to leave that to one side. I'll pick that up in the budget debate in a couple of months. But my concern here, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, relates to what both you and the Honorable Financial Secretary said about the surplus that is being projected. With such a slim surplus, we're looking at a burn rate, to use the Chief Officer's expression, of more than $7 million a month for this particular item. Does this not fill you, Mr. Chairman, with some real concern about whether or not you'll have any surplus?
Member for Red Bay, thank you for your question. The number that is projected in terms of the remainder of the year is featured already in the $1 billion and $30 million of forecasted expenditure, and that would therefore correspond to the $3 million in surplus that had previously been indicated. As I noted in earlier comments, in previous years we've had very significant deficit and projections at this point in the year, and we end up with a significant swing and a resulting fairly modest surplus. So while it is difficult to accurately forecast these things. We do have a trend where these types of issues occur. In general, as you noted earlier, member, this is as you described it, the notorious NGS 55. It has been a considerable challenge for many administrations, as it is also a challenge for this administration. The Ministry of Health and Wellness is undertaking initiatives which will seek to help push down these types of expenditures for or under this particular appropriation reference by trying to implement wellness initiatives to specifically improve the long-term health of our people and to help manage these types of expenses. This is, I think, probably the first time that these types of initiatives will have been implemented, and this action attempted in order to have a positive impact on what is otherwise being a growing expenditure under NGS 55. So yes, we do share the concerns, and we are certainly attempting to find ways to mitigate the levels of increase that has historically been reflected in this particular appropriation. Are there any other questions in respect to this item? If not, I will put I'll put the item to the vote. All those in favor of supplementary expenditure with respect to NGS 55, tertiary medical care at various local and overseas institutions for an amount of $21,826,000, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no.
Mr.
The ayes.
Mr. Chair, can I have a division to see who supports the indigent, please?
Thank you. We will.
Honorable Juliana O'Connor Connolly.
Aye.
Honorable Kenneth Bryan.
Aye.
Honorable Sabrina Turner.
Aye.
Honorable Johanny Ebanks.
Aye.
Honorable Andre Ebanks.
Aye.
Honorable Brenda Bush.
Aye.
Honorable Catherine Ebanks Wilkes.
Aye.
Ms. Heather Bodden.
Aye.
Honorable Isaac Rankin.
Aye.
Honorable Makiva Bush.
Aye.
Honorable Roy McTaggart.
Abstain.
Mr. Joseph Hugh.
Abstain.
Mr. Moses Garcano. Absent. Ms. Barbara Connolly. Absent. Honorable Sir Alden McLaughlin.
Abstain.
Mr. David White.
Abstain.
Mr. Christopher Saunders.
Abstain.
Mr. Dwayne Seymour. Absent.
Honorable members, the result of the division is 10 ayes, 5 abstentions, and 3 absences. I know the hour is such that we're about 20 minutes past the normal lunch break, but given that we are close to finalizing the vote in respect to this,
Mr. Chair.
I will press on, and I will give the Minister for Health and Wellness the opportunity to thank her staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to publicly thank the ministerial team and definitely finance for all their hard work, and definitely for the support of my colleagues in this initiative, making sure that our indigents and overseas bills can pay as we improve the lives of so many people over all three islands. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister, and as in the past, those sentiments are shared by the Chair. We will now move on to the last item on the schedule, which is CIN2, health insurance for civil service pensioners, for an amount of $8,800,000. Are there any questions on this item?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Oh.
Which one are we going with? Sorry, Member for Redby.
Mr. Chairman, just some just asking for some explanation. Because the original appropriation was 36,564,714, it does not appear from this document that any raids were made on the fund, the 2023 funds in 2022. So my question is, what has caused the budget to need another $8,800,000 for the next 3 months?
Thank you, member for Red Bay. We have the acting deputy governor, an official member, to respond.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the honorable member for his question. The 2022-2023 budget for SIN 2 reflects within it increases in the premium rates. There is approximately a 13% increase in 2022 over prior year and a further 5.6 premium increase in 2023. The impact of that, along with the forecasted increase in the number of persons who were insured under the program, required that we would need to have this higher sum. This was identified both at the SPS process and in the budgeting process, but we were not able to secure the full funding. This is a 24-month period, and the funds requested represent just under 3 months of operating expenses. This is something we anticipated would occur. We have been able to utilize our existing funding to carry us through the vast majority of the fiscal period, but we are requiring this funding now in order to close out the year as anticipated.
Thank you, Acting Deputy Governor.
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to thank the Honorable Acting DG for that, and just to ask one closing question. So we can expect in the upcoming budget a sum in excess of 45 million to be appropriated with respect to health insurance for civil service pensioners for 2024.
Mr. Chairman, I can't speak to a budgetary process that's ongoing. I can say that the certainly based upon the current premium rates that we would require and the forecasted increases in the number of insured, that we would need no less than this to go into the upcoming year, as premiums are, premium rates would also have an impact on what we would need going forward. So to the extent that they increase and the number of persons insured increase, that would impact our request going into the budgetary process.
Thank you, Honorable Acting Deputy Governor. Do we have one more? We have a question from member for West Bay, Bordentown West. Pardon me.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, through you to the Acting Honorable Deputy Governor, how many civil servants and civil servant dependents are we looking at included in this number?
Mr. Chairman, just to clarify, that is civil service pensioners, correct? Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I'm looking at information from our September billing, and it shows that the total number of insured persons are 2,477 persons, which would include primary insured and their dependents.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And through you, would you perchance have that number for last year, for 2022?
Just one moment, Mr. Chairman, just referring to my notes.
Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I am informed that that number as of December 2022 for primary insured and dependents was 2,451 persons.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, one final question. Recognizing that the civil service is the largest customer for the Cineco, and looking at Cineco's annual financial statements, I realized that the civil service and the civil service pensioners plans actually operate at a profit, and the other plans that Cineco operate actually runs at a loss. And in order for Cineco to remain regulatory compliant and they have to make a profit, it appears as if though the civil service is actually subsidizing the other losses of the other plans that are basically non-civil service members. With that, Mr. Chairman, the question is, are there any steps being taken? Because it appears as if though the civil service and the civil service pensions are being charged more. Are there any steps being taken at least to reconcile or at least get the true cost of what it is? Because it looks as if they are subsidizing the retirees from the private sector.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know that I'm best placed to speak to Cineco's pricing arrangements. I will say that we've provided our feedback on our observations, and the cost of health care doesn't just impact our civil service pensioners. That cost is passed through to every output the government produces, so it is a matter of pointed interest to POCS as well.
Thank you, Honorable Acting Deputy Governor. We do have, I think, staff from Cineco who may be able to shed some light on that issue.
Actually, I have one more question for her first before we shift.
Okay.
Just in terms of value for money and the premiums being paid, would you say it's safe to say that introducing choice within the civil service for what it is that you're paying in terms of premiums, where civil service members would literally be able to go to whichever hospital or doctor they prefer? I mean, is that something that you guys are actively considering and making a proposal to Cineco in terms of what it is that you're paying per premium? Because if you look at it, you're actually paying rates that are literally competitive to the private sector in terms of private sector employees. So at least the civil servants and their dependents would have some level of choice. In other words, are you getting value for money for the price that you're paying?
Mr. Chairman, what I can say is that the civil service healthcare benefit as provided through Cineco is a very competitive one. It is one that does not involve any form of copay, any form of having to meet a deductible. It truly allows our employees, the vast majority of whom, well, the majority of whom, some 55%, are women, many of whom are single-parent households. It provides them peace of mind. It is a comprehensive form of insurance that allows us to know that our families, whatever ailment that they may encounter, that they will have access to world-class health care as a result. So for that peace of mind and the benefit that we provide, I think it is a very highly competitive area of our total compensation program. I'm always trying to make the numbers work, and so I continue to look at what plan design, what the implications of plan design are on the carrying cost of that benefit, because sustainability always has to be foremost in our mind. But in terms of, is it a valuable benefit, and how does that value compared to what we might expect with working elsewhere. I think the civil service has a very highly competitive offering in that area.
Thank you very much, Honorable Acting Deputy Governor. If there are no further questions, I will put this item to the vote. All those in favor of supplementary expenditure with respect to CIN2 health insurance for civil service pensioners for an amount of $8,800,000, please say aye.
Aye.
And
Mr.
those
Chair,
against, no.
Can I have a division for those who support the health care insurance for civil servants and pensioners and their dependents to see who supports it? Thank you.
Thank you, Wilden.
Honorable Juliana O'Connor Connolly.
Aye.
Honorable Kenneth Bryan.
Aye.
Honorable Sabrina Turner.
Aye.
Honorable Johanna Ebanks.
Aye.
Honorable Andre Ebanks.
Aye.
Honorable Bernard Bush. Aye. Honorable Catherine Ebanks Wilkes.
Aye.
Miss Heather Budden.
Aye.
Honorable Isaac Rankin.
Aye.
Honorable Makiva Bush.
Aye.
Honorable Roy McTaggart.
Abstain.
Mr. Joseph Hugh.
Abstain.
Mr. Moses Carcano. Absent. Miss Barbara Connolly. Absent. Honorable Sir Alden McLaughlin.
Abstain.
Mr. David White.
Abstain.
Mr. Christopher Saunders.
Abstain.
Mr. Dwayne Seymour. Absent.
Honorable members, the result of the division is 10 ayes, 5 abstentions, and 3 absences. The ayes have it. The honorable members, this completes voting in respect of the items on the schedule for the 2023 financial year. I wish to thank honorable ministers, honorable parliamentary secretaries, chief officers, and other staff and civil servants that provided answers to questions raised, as well as to the honorable members of the opposition for their questions. The approval of these items by Finance Committee will now enable these items to form part of a supplementary appropriation bill for the 2023 financial year, which members will be aware will be presented to this committee no later than 3 months after the 2023 financial year ends on 31st December. So by 31st March 2024, that supplementary appropriation bill will be presented to this Parliament. Proceedings, honourable members, in Finance Committee on the examination of the 11 items as noted has come to an end. The next steps are as follows. Proceedings in Finance Committee are suspended to give the Clerk of Parliament time to...
Just before the suspension, I just wanted to ask a question of procedure. Mr. Chair, I've been in this Honourable House now 6 years, and all appropriation papers that have been brought never had at the bottom of the appropriation the outline of the Section 12, Section 11.5, Section 9.5s. Is this something that the ministry has now implemented that we are unaware of? And lastly, I noticed that it was not the same under appropriation that was not under an elected member, and the last one. So I just want to know if there is a new way forward that I'm unaware of and this committee should be aware of.
Honourable Member, I will have the Honourable Financial Secretary respond on that question for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The general answer is no. This does not represent any change in procedure at all. The reference to the Section 11.5s and the Section 9.5s was done simply to make it absolutely crystal clear to honourable members how the revised appropriations that we envisage at the end of a year were calculated. It's not always the situation where you take the original appropriation, you add a supplementary that is before the committee, and you add a cross, and you get the number at the end of the year. There are other steps in arriving at the end of year number which are not immediately apparent, and that reconciliation was then shown beneath the detail in the paper that honourable members of the committee received and were looked at during the course of this. So it does not represent a change in the procedure, and in respect of the one particular item that was not subject to a responsibility by a minister, the fact that there was no 11.5 reference, there was no 9.5 reference to that particular item would simply reflect the fact that those probably did not happen during the course of the year. Had they happened, we would have certainly have recorded them on the page.
Thank you very much. In respect of the next steps that were being outlined earlier, proceedings in Finance Committee are suspended to give the Clerk of Parliament time to prepare the committee report and its sorry. Sorry, thank you, members. Just in terms of clarity again, proceedings in Finance Committee are suspended to give the Clerk of Parliament time to prepare the committee report and its associated minutes.
Mr. Chairman, are you suspending Finance Committee, or do we adjourn Finance Committee to report back to the House?
Okay.
Yeah. What are you gonna do?
Thank you, honourable members. And just by way of clarity then, proceedings in Finance Committee will be suspended to give the, adjourned to give the Clerk of Parliament time to prepare the committee report and its associated minutes. When the committee's report minutes have been prepared, the committee will meet in the large committee room to review and approve the report and minutes. And then the House should be reconvened, and I shall table the committee report and minutes in Parliament and speak very briefly upon the tabling of the report and minutes. Therefore, the committee is now adjourned to enable these next steps. Thank you all very much for attending to the important business of these islands and enabling the delivery of services to our people. Thank you.